Hello and welcome to the video. This is my overview and review of this model here from HGLRC. This is the Veyron25CR, a 2.5 inch Cinewook FPV drone. Now this might be a good model if you've maybe been flying the regular indoor whoops that sit on the palm of your hand and looking to move up. It has the protection around the 5-bladed props, and that protection does mean that it will bounce off stuff, so if you really wanted to, you could fly it indoors, although you're going to have to be a little bit careful because it is quite a powerful little model, but you can easily go outside and rip it around. Like the Racewhoop 30 that I looked at a couple of weeks ago, this is really designed to be a robust little model with quite a lot of power for the size. The EVA duct protectors that go around the props have a little bit more openness than the Racewhoop 30 does, so there's not the same issue potentially with crashing and the duct actually hitting the end of the prop and snapping it off. But also that extra little bit of airflow does mean that it's a little bit quieter as well. So standard stuff with this, I'll go through and show you how it comes in the box, talk about the Betaflight setup, and then talk about what it's like to fly. So while I unbox it, let's go through the specs. This again is the HGLRC Veyron25CR. This is the analog version, so it has a wheelbase of 120mm. The size is 187 by 164mm, so it's a slightly compressed X layout. In the middle of this is an F7 base flight controller, believe it or not. So it's a Zeus F722 mini flight controller, and the ESCs are Zeus 28 amp BL_S ESCs capable of 3 to 6S and 28 amp continuous, peak current of 35 amps, but you're not going to use that on this. Zeus Nano at the back, great little VTX. It'll go over everything from pit mode, 2500, 200 and 350 milliwatts. I really like these little VTXs. I'm putting them in lots of lightweight builds myself. The nice Rattle 2 FPV camera at the front from Cadix. Lots of the current HGLRC models I've been getting in have that at the front, and it just works really nicely, and it's out the way of everything here, and is also rake adjustable, so there's nothing in the image, and you can set it to the level that you want. Out on the arms there are the Aeolus. Still not sure how you say that. 1404 3600 kV motor running Gemfan D63 3-inch 5-bladed propellers. Now you do get a spare pack of those in the box, and that's a nice welcome touch, although I haven't, touch wood, yet managed to break one on this, unlike that Racewhoop 30 that I looked at. So let's quickly go through the Betaflight setup. Again, dump and diff all are available below on a link if you really want to go and have a look. Now it's easy to plug in because the USB port is on the top, so we'll just plug the cable in, and surprise surprise, there's something in the data flash. This has been armed before it left the factory. Good to see. Only the IRC tramp set up for the VTX in the ports tab. Configuration, the props are set to be reversed, which is pretty standard for HGLRC stuff. D-Shock 600, 8K gyro and PID loop frequencies. It's an F7 base processor on this flight controller, so not even bothering it at all. This is how all the stuff is set up. There is a proper beeper on this, which is beautiful to see, so you could add that as well, but no real need. Voltage and amperage meters set like that. Failsafe is set to drop. No GPS on this stuff. PID tuning is set like that. Rate profile is set like that. So again, dump and differ below if you want to go into detail. Jump into modes, have a quick look. Not a lot set up at all. I'd recommend coming in here and tweaking it to how you want it. And then the OSD tab is the only other one I'd probably come in just to move things around. This is pretty basic layout. Video transmitter is all set up. The tables are all ready to rock and roll. So again, you can just set your default stuff in here. Now before we go and fly, let me talk a little bit about the kind of noise that you get out of this thing. It's actually not as bad as I expected. This is only a 2.5 inch prop. There are 4 of them with 5 blades whizzing away, and you do get quite a high whine out of them. It is a lot noisier than a lot of other 2.5 and 3 inch models that I have here, thanks mainly to the fact that it's using 5-bladed props. There's a big prop area, lots and lots of losses from each of those blades that are part of the prop, and that does mean that it does pull a little bit more juice than you'd expect for this kind of model. Flying outside is very, very easy to do. It's got bags of power to do that as well. So this, again, would be quite a nice one to maybe fly around with the bumpers installed indoors, with the throttle calmed a little bit, and then outside you can just have a lot of fun. Surprise, surprise, the rattle camera is working beautifully as it always does, and outside it is a bit less noisy than I expected, although you can hear that high whine at the other end of the field. Noisier than a lot of the smaller models that I've flown. Not as much power as I expected. This is flying on 4S. Fast forward flight is taking about 45% throttle. This is a lightweight setup with a 650 4S mAh battery, and it's also flying without the action camera on. If you put an action camera on this, I think you've definitely got to go for a naked GoPro or an SMO 4K style camera rather than a full fat GoPro. Capable of basic flips and rolls, but I think there are better options around if you want acrobatics, and I was getting about 4.5 minutes flight time from that 650 mAh pack. If you go up to an 1100 mAh pack, you'll get an extra couple of minutes. So this is definitely not an endurance quad, but it is an awful lot of fun to fly. This is another well-made, well-thought-out quad, and it is nice and simple to access stuff with the way it's put together, with a slightly more conventional setup to things like that Race Whoop 30. Analog and digital versions available with lots of receiver choices, so you can pretty much have whatever you want, so it's a lot easier to bind. Be aware that the version I ordered here with the FreeSky stuff did come with the international firmware. Rattle camera performance, as we saw, is as good as you'd expect. No real surprises there. The angle is adjustable, which is very nice, and the ducting around the props isn't in the view. I do like the idea of the removable bumpers for learning. Taking those bumpers off to allow a little bit more airflow around the props does also seem to make it that little bit quieter too. Love the touches. Things like the top mounted USB port does mean that it's really easy to plug in and tweak things when you get to that point, or maybe you're an existing flyer and you want to do things like tweak rates. And there's enough clearance around the props that you don't snap one in a crash. So even if you come down pretty hard and the ducting gets pushed in a little bit, it isn't necessarily going to snap the end off the prop. I do personally like the coloured plastics. I know this isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but the fact that it's nice and yellow means that it is an awful lot easier to find when it comes down in the grass or in a hedge, particularly as it also has the buzzer at the back and also a couple of flashing LEDs, which make it even easier to find when you're in darker environments or dusk, or maybe when it lands inside a tree. The only thing I'm not a fan of on this entire model is the props. This whole fad of using 5-bladed props that produce an awful lot of thrust but use an awful lot of power to do so and can create quite a bit of noise is a little bit of a fad in my humble opinion. I would have preferred a 3-inch model with a 3-bladed prop that would have produced a similar amount of lift and thrust but would have done so far more effectively. This is a great little quad. It's designed around protection and power. Maybe a good quad, as I said at the beginning, if you are past that indoor whoop stage and are looking for something bigger and badder to move on to that's still going to be nice and protected and be harder to crack and break things on. Or if you're looking for a backpack ripper and can handle the additional noise and those shorter flight times. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organised into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.